waiting for my slide to come up. I'm Lois Engelbrecht. I'm not an educator. I'm a social worker. And when I first started, 20-odd years ago, trying to get into schools with the idea of child protection, I was told by my educator husband, don't make teachers do more than they're already doing, because teachers are doing a lot. And Doug's asking you to do more, and by the way, so am I. Because I think we do have the teachers do have the capacity to do that. And one of the things is curriculum. What are the lesson plans? How do you teach children protective behaviors? Children, by the way, cannot really protect themselves from abuse because it's always an older, more powerful person who does it. But there are ways that we can help them get help, and we can help them understand that it's not their fault, so that they can eventually get to have the confidence to maybe tell. I never told. I didn't tell for 20-odd years. And then it was kind of like, so what? And that was so what was a good thing. You know what, I'm used to teaching under the mango tree in the Philippines, so this is really, okay. As a social worker, everything you do has to be within a system. Okay, so hopefully your policy will state very clearly somewhere that everyone in your system has to be educated on child protection. So this is the part that says you have to teach your children. Communicate this policy annually to all students and their parents. Child abuse is a systemic thing. It's not just an isolated incident. There has to be vulnerabilities of the child. There has to be vulnerabilities of the parent. There have to be unsafe issues in the community. And then, of course, you have cultural issues. We have to look at our own children in international schools. Our children are vulnerable because there's isolation, because there's insularity. I like to say that our children are in this hot air balloon. You know, we talk about third culture kids. In my generation, because I am a third culture kid, actually I'm a missionary kid, and I was the only non-Indian in my village, and I didn't own a shoe for a long time. So my generation of third culture kids is quite different than the next generations, where I think, you know, they say, oh, the third culture kid can navigate. But you know, they navigate from this up here, okay? Then they come down to go shopping for their cheese, okay? And in Ghana, the cheese is very expensive because it comes from somewhere else. Then you go up. Then you come down to the ground to go to a casting to learn about the culture. Then you go up, and then you come down to buy a product from that country to show that you've been in that country. But you're still always here. Yes, you can navigate. So this isolation actually creates vulnerability. And I try to then work with this understanding of where the child is to have the curriculum or the lesson plans, because curriculum is a teacher's word. I'm going to use lesson plans, to focus on the child, on our children, particularly our children. Because there are lots of curriculum out there. There's Committee for Children. You've heard of Committee for Children, Second Step. Michigan Model for Health, because a lot of states in the U.S. Mandate personal safety, so a lot of states have their things. And what I hear over and over again is this stuff is not relevant to our children. So we tried to sit down, our committee tried to sit down, not tried, we did sit down and make the curriculum relevant. And all of you have seen the handbook, the Child Protection Handbook. On page 102 begins what we did working on the curriculum or the lesson plans for all of our grade levels from K to grade 4, focusing on the vulnerabilities of our children and the strengths, okay? Now, when you write curriculum, when you write lesson plans, you have to look at what information is lacking in our children. How do you develop the skills to deal with that information? I mean, Ebola is a very good example. Okay, we have Ebola, and you can't tell everyone, you know, be worried about Ebola, but you're going to scare them unless you give them the skills to how to handle with Ebola. And then, of course, you have to give them the self-esteem. You know, a lot of I work with the grassroots social workers, the grassroots police, and their attitude about who we are is very different from who I know who we are. We are perceived as very snooty. We're perceived as know-it-alls. We're perceived as rich. Rather than understanding that being a minority and a foreigner in a country is actually quite vulnerable. So we have to give this information, the skills, and teach that self-esteem about being vulnerable in a country so that you don't actually come across as being snooty like many of our international. I mean, I don't know how many times I said, you know, we don't want to teach our children certain rights because they'll become snotty American children. Okay, so this is what we did. One of the, you know, the information that's lacking for many of our children is what is the law of the country. And Veronica and I work with how to help you know what the law is. And okay, why should we tell children the law? Because sometimes in these African countries, the age of responsibility is 12. And you know, if you, how many of you raised your hand, you're working with adolescents, they're going around taking sexy pictures of each other and sharing them on the phone. Actually, if you share a picture that the person does not allow you to, you're breaking the law in Ghana. And you could be arrested. Okay, so maybe the law, we have to tell our children what the law is in that country besides the parents and the adults knowing it. Now there are 4 major things, general things, that is in the curriculum. We're going to teach children who are, and most children are safe. So we're going to be teaching them what is the law, how can you know when you're unsafe, how can you get away from an unsafe situation, and how can you tell. And most children will be okay. But then there are those children who cannot get away, which by the way is most children cannot get away from a person who wants to touch their private body parts. I mean, even I was told, come into the bushes, and I followed, take your pants down, and I followed. Okay, so you can't tell, but we're giving these children the information that even if this happened, you can find someone to tell, and we're going to build their support system. Remember, their support system is in this balloon. And most people are going to be hurt by people they know in the balloon. So how do you expand their support system to include you as the teacher, as the counselor, whatever? Okay, the next group, 4 is missing, but the next level 4 is those children who can never tell, who can never say no, who can never tell. And for these children, often they internalize what happened to them, and they are bad. So by teaching them that this is not their fault, even if they never tell, we want to minimize the negative impact, such as the suicide, the shame and the guilt, which leads to suicide, which leads to drug addiction, which leads to criminal behavior. And if you look at most men in jail, were victims of some kind of violence as children. Now, level 4 to me is the most important, which is long-term prevention. We are teaching children today, especially our boys, how to behave so that they do not become an offender tomorrow. I grew up in India, and the Indian men, they have a sense of impunity that they can touch you wherever they want. Now, things are better. I'm 59, so things have gotten better in India. But growing up, you just have to walk down the street, and they'll touch you however they want. So I started walking down the street like this, and I was forever told have good posture. Well, having a good posture for me was vulnerable, and this is something we also have to look at our children. When you take away what is bad on them, maybe it's actually protecting them. That's a counselor thing, right? Okay. Now, what's important when you do the framework for your curriculum, and look at ours, is you have to have local scenarios. You cannot say, well, I don't know about many countries, but you can't use the hitchhiking story in many countries, because our children don't hitchhike. They have drivers, they have taxis or whatever. So you find where are your children vulnerable, and you create scenarios there. And so if those of you, oh no, you're all educators. When you look at our curriculum, because my 10 minutes are over, when you look at our curriculum, use it. But make sure that you look at the scenarios and you make it relevant to your population. And the high school, for instance, has 4. This is elementary has 5 lessons, and the high school has 4. And someone asked me, but what if you need more than 4? When you look at these, there are suggested engagements for each of these concepts. And if this population needs more understanding of this concept, there are lots of suggested engagements. And so you can have 4 different days for one concept. So I look forward to having my session this afternoon, and any of you who are going to use the materials, we have an excellent team here that Dennis will be introducing. Contact us at any time. Thank you.